Welcome. This is Melissa Joy, and I'm joined by Lisa Hesse. And today we're going to have a conversation about the relationship and intersection of health and wealth, two areas that we each think about every day. And we're so glad you could join us. So to get started, I wanted to just introduce each of us. I'm Melissa Joy. I'm founder and president of Pearl Planning. Pearl Planning is a financial planning firm located in Dexter, Michigan, and we think about your relationship with money and your financial decisions and help you feel more confident in making those decisions. And I'm joined today by a good friend and a wonderful health professional, Lisa Hesse. Lisa, you're a health and wellness coach as well as a yoga instructor, and I know you have more tricks up your sleeve than that. Tell me a little bit about yourself and your business, which you can find at lisahesse.com.
Hi, Melissa. I'm super excited to be
Hi,
here
Lisa.
today and have this conversation with you. So I am a health and wellness coach and a yoga instructor, personal trainer. Come at my business from a perspective of having over 35 years of experience in the health and wellness field, exercise physiology background, sports psychology minor. And what I do with my clients is help them find a way to celebrate their inner strengths, take that inner strength that they all have within them, utilize that strength when they're looking at different areas of their life that they just feel a little challenged by. And well-being is kind of a wide umbrella, and underneath it are a lot of different areas. Mm-hmm. And I just love that we're having this conversation because a lot of times my clients go to one place or the other where their attention is, and it's all connected. So yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation with you and talk about the intersection between our worlds and how they're all connected.
Full disclosure, we met through friends, but we've worked together. You've been a wellness coach for me, and I think some of the conversations, just our philosophies of how to work with people and the exploration that's not linear but is very holistic is something that I know resonates with the way that I think about working with people, and I can get that sense in working together that it's the same for you. So I'm so glad we've been talking for months about having this conversation. I'm glad that we can kind of get it out into the universe.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, me too. Me too.
So for us to get started, I want to talk about, kind of your new thought concepts and what you're thinking about right now. But can you give a description of what a wellness coach or what you would do with your clients? Is there a set program, or is it a unique or personal journey for each person?
Absolutely. I come to my approach with my clients is very much about meeting them where they are. It's very individualized. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of information out there that we can have at our fingertips, but how do we take that information and turn around from the perspective of our own life can sometimes be really challenging. And so I don't have a set program. I have some loose structure to how I work with a client, starting with, a little bit of a deeper dive, what's going on for them. Oftentimes my clients come to me with one specific area of their well-being that they want to approach, but what we find in our conversations is that maybe that has shifted for them, or they find that, there's something else that's actually a higher priority for them, all related to their well-being.
It's really interesting. You said something when you first started speaking, which was there's so much information available. And the proliferation of information, having more information than we can ever have at our fingertips, hasn't resulted in people feeling more, on average, people feeling more confident about their health. And in some cases, it may make them feel less successful or less confident or just harried in terms of filtering. When I've worked with you, you help to prioritize and think of what's important. And the same goes for the financial world, where you can DIY, your Google search away from any answer. But answers and information aren't necessarily what people are looking for. They're looking for something that they can integrate into their lives. Sometimes they're looking for simplification, not over information. I see that rhyming throughout. It's a theme throughout life, and it's certainly something that we both try to tackle in our areas of expertise.
Yes, exactly. And I love that you brought up some really key points. One is simplification.
Mm-hmm.
One is this idea that sometimes choice, although it seems like a good idea on the surface, choice in and of itself can be a challenge, right?
Daunting,
and it can
yes.
add some stress. And then you've got, you named it. So you have there's that FOMO, there's that fear of missing out. What's the latest trend? Look at these people that are doing this thing. Why can't I do that?
Mm-hmm.
So that also plays into it. You started by talking about the relationship and how you approach your work from the perspective of having a relationship with your client, really understanding what goes on for them in their lives in terms of their well-being, in terms of their financial wellness.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing with the work that I do. So why is this important to my client? It can seem on the surface that this one thing seems to be the most important, but why? Right?
Yeah.
And where do they want to be? And I think that you do the same thing with your clients, where you're not just about today, especially the work that you do, right? You're about, like, where are you going to be in 10 years? Where are you going to be when you retire? Where are you going to be? I do the same thing with my clients. Who do you want to be on the other side of this thing that's niggling at you that you can't feel like you have control of? Where do you want to be? Who do you want to be? And then bring it back so that is your motivator.
So true. Like, if today was all that mattered, you could put health on the back burner,
mm-hmm.
and you could put your money on the back burner because it's living to the max in a single moment in time. And so much of what I work to do is both to honor that current self and build them up,
mm-hmm.
but also to protect and think about the future self, because that's where the trade-offs are, whether it's how much money do you put aside for retirement, or how do you take care of this, your physical being, which you need for many years, as we know, because of longevity.
Yeah. That in and of itself is a powerful tool. When I have clients sort of embrace this idea of put yourself where you'd like to be with your well-being now and begin to make your decisions from there. And you
mm-hmm.
and I have worked on that
right.
with your own work. It can be that shift that can be very pivotal, very transformational. Right. If I'm making this decision from this place of a person who does this regularly, then this is the decision I would be making, and there wouldn't be a question.
Right. Like, you need, some people, and I will say myself,
mm-hmm.
need an extra accountability partner,
mm-hmm.
Because there are so many, both, we discussed information coming at you, but also responsibilities. I know that you primarily work with women, and while our conversation is about people, as a working mom and a woman, there are only so many hours in the day, and you feel accountable to the outcomes and you're accountable to so many different people. I think about my clients. I, of course, think about my kids, my husband, our family, and how, we're relating. So making yourself a priority can be a huge challenge, and there's a lot of competing interests. And the same goes for, balancing between retirement and college, so those trade-offs, or that balance, or that prioritization is something that having a partner on the journey, somebody who also is vested in your success, for me, in some cases, feels like a necessity.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and you hit upon something so important with regards to you hear when you're on a plane and they say put your oxygen mask on first before you
Yep.
put your kids on.
Right.
And we, as women, I believe, and I'm going to generalize here, but I do believe this is true, that a lot of us very early on have that message that, no, actually put everybody else's oxygen mask on first, and then you put yours on. So you take care of everything else in your life, and then you look towards you. And it's a very interesting and very deep-seated message that we get in an early life, which is the exact opposite of what we really should be doing, because if we don't put our oxygen mask on, we're not going to be there for everybody else. And so I use a term sometime, which is this idea of fierce ownership, like own yourself and your value and your needs first, and that then segues into how you can be there for everybody else.
So we're going to spend most of our conversation today talking about your concept of fierce ownership, which when you speak about it, I hear your passion, and it really resonates with me. Quick anecdote, when you talk about that oxygen mask, I say that exact thing to clients, that analogy, when we talk about things like an emergency reserve, where you're like, Bobby needs this week, and if you don't have money that's there at the end of every month, then the next big problem is a challenge not just for you, but the entire family. Or I also, talk about that you can't borrow to pay for your retirement like you can for college savings. Not that I'm encouraging, student loan debt, but it is such a important concept that if you're going to be responsible for the success of others, you have to first be able to breathe. And that oxygen mask doesn't just apply in the airplane. It's so much of what I'm sure you see with new clients, the stress or the backpack that's a burden of the should-haves, the could-haves, the would-haves, and the stress of just, I know I don't have this. And not only do I live with, the health outcomes or the financial outcomes, but I also live with the guilt or the fear or the frustration of carrying that knowledge that I'm not doing enough. And the same goes for me. A lot of times when we start a conversation, people will be very fearful, thinking, I feel very vulnerable talking about, and that is not, there's not a prerequisite that you have money problems. That it's regardless of your wealth, that people can have anxiety and fear around health or money. So uncovering the why of why is this engagement important to you can really uncover some powerful driving factors in someone's relationship with their health or their wealth.
I loved the word deficit. Not that I love the word deficit or what it means. Rather, that's such a great example of how our lives intersect in the work that we do. We know from a neuroscience perspective that when we have a sense of not enough, whether it's financial, whether it's time, whether it's our own sense of self, we've put ourselves into a place of like that stress hormone that goes off, the reptilian brain that wants us to be safe, and then we get into the stress hormones that are released when we feel stressed, when we feel like we're not enough, when we don't have enough time, when there isn't enough money. And we make our decisions from a place of fear instead of from a place of joy or love or compassion. And so there's so many areas in well-being where we tend to be in that sense of deficit.
So true, and it's in my world as well. There's your ability to make good financial decisions when you have that scarcity mentality, when there is a deficit or you're focused on loss and not abundance. Can be gut. It just can have a huge impact on reactionary decisions, losing your plan. It's a critical factor. One of the main reasons I think there's value in a financial planner. Certainly there's technical value, but someone to be on a journey with you and making decisions as a, kind of, this is Yoda and Luke Skywalker talking, right? So Yoda in the ear saying, use the Force, relax right now, remember what you were taught. So, I mean, we could talk for hours about the impact of anxiety, fear, stress, whatever word you want to use, on your entire being and your sense of wellness.
Right. Right, we could definitely go down that rabbit hole. And we don't have months to have this conversation. So what it brings to mind for me is how I think you and I both work with our clients, because we don't start from that place of vulnerability and deficit, and you're not saying to your client right off the bat, like, I don't see enough money in your account. Instead, what you say is, okay, you have this much, and where do you want to take that much? And how can we build it? And I do the same thing with my clients.
Totally.
So I start right away from a place of what's going well, because invariably there is something going well in somebody's well-being. And if there isn't, and if I'm hearing that this may be more in the realm of therapy, I'm trained to know that, because there's definitely that. Right?
Yeah, there can be some.
But in general, if we can start from a place of positivity, so we start from a place of, you're not actually in the deficit. This is where you are right now. And that might have been your story, but let's start the story starting now. Being an accountability tool, and you know this, Melissa, that I'm not like texting you every day and being like, hey, did you get on this thing? It's more that you know that you have shared something really hard for you with somebody else, and that I am there, I've got your back, and I'm going to be a sense of support.
Absolutely, and that's what, in my work as well, there are always opportunities and tasks. I really work to prioritize so that, if there's a longer list, there are achievable things on the list that, even if some will take the work of years, some things, are lower hanging fruit. And it's so important in both of our worlds that we're not selling our services based on fear. So we're in engagement, it's not sold anyway, but we operate in a world where, it's lose 10 pounds this month, or, January 1st is the day you should start everything with your New Year's resolution, or certainly in my world as well, there's a lot of fear-based tactics, and taking the high road is, I can't imagine living in that world personally as a business owner, but it's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Not just from the perspective of how it feels on the surface. Literally, our physiological selves are going to be responding differently when we are looking at this from a place of I get to, from a place of positivity. And it doesn't mean that there's not going to be some discomfort.
Totally.
Yeah,
of course.
And it doesn't mean that it's not going to be hard work.
I look at relationships that are successful in financial advice, and you will be comfortable with the level of trust that results in a vulnerability where not at every moment, but at some moments you may need to come with, here's what's going on in my life. I did not expect to be in this circumstance, but it is where I am today. I need your help. Let's get through this. So, the courage that it takes to have those conversations is built upon trust.
Right.
And that's what creates resilience. It's not a solo journey, but you need the right team members to be on board.
I love the word trust. I love the word non-judgment. I love this idea that, for me personally, the money piece of my life is very niggly. It's very hard. If I let it, it can keep me up at night.
Which is totally every person.
Yes, exactly.
Regardless of their net worth. It feels the same, and people don't realize that.
Yeah, right. So there's comfort. That sense of community is really powerful, the connectivity. And what's interesting is that clients will come to me from very different places in their lives and very different, you could look at it as being very different issues, but what's underneath it is a sense of wanting to have more control, connectivity, joy, purpose, relevancy.
Oh, purpose is such a big deal.
Yeah, yeah, and we get there from different ways, right? Just like you do with the work that you do, you're going to get to this account or this this money issue, maybe not right off the bat from what looks like the obvious way.
Right. It's not tell me everything about yourself and then I'm going to be your soothsayer, but there's some, there's an underlying journey that we both have seen in similar veins.
Yeah.
So I want to dive into fierce ownership because there are components of fierce ownership. It's not just amazing collection of words, which, I mean, when I first heard you describing, kind of your focus on fierce ownership, I was like, oh, let's stop the presses. It is time to record this conversation because this is it's a really powerful concept.
Mm.
But you also have the underlying components of fierce ownership. And hopefully it's okay that I share that the first one is sleep. So that's a very, it feels like a very, technical, okay, this is not woo-woo, this is like science. So tell me about how sleep relates to your ability to have fierce ownership of yourself.
Okay. Yeah, and the fierce ownership sort of came to me when somebody was asking me, what is it that you do? And I started with, this is how I work with clients, but then we started, peeling back the layers, and I just said to her, all of a sudden, I was like, you know what it is? It's fiercely owning your own sense of, so my sister said, when I asked my sister about how she gets enough sleep, how she does it, because she's super, super busy, and she starts really early in the morning, and she goes until, whatever, like a lot of us. And I probably coined the phrase from her because she said, I just have fierce ownership of my sleep. And I was like, love it, love it, love it. And so sleep specifically is truly like if I could work with all my clients right off the bat, starting with it would be sleep. Mm-hmm. And we know from a neuroscience background that sleep isn't just something that sounds like a nice idea. That literally in our brains, when we're sleeping, that is how we are re-energizing our neurons. That is how we are gaining back any kind of information that we learned during the day. The seeping in and the holding on to facts and information and memory happens when we're sleeping. It's really powerful. And you can't bank sleep. It's one of those things that you can't have a week where you're not getting enough sleep and then you sleep for the weekend. That doesn't work. Just like if you don't have the money in your account on Monday, it's not going to miraculously appear on Saturday.
Yeah.
And the impact on our physical health is really powerful. From the hormones that are released when we get enough sleep, which are sustaining our well-being habits and the way that we want to be. When that is flipped, there's a hormone that will be secreted that is going to block our receptors for, I could get kind of really into the deep science of it, but just on the surface, basically what it is when we are in this deep sleep place, the hormones are going back into balance, and that's where the growth happens. So athletes of mine understand this from a physical perspective. If they're training for something really hard, you're always going to have a rest day. Even if you have a workout one day, you're going to have some part of that workout where you're not going so hard. Same thing is what's happening with our brains when we don't have enough to sleep. The fierce ownership comes into where you're prioritizing your time and where you have to make some shifts to make it happen. So, that's when the things come into play. For example, what devices are you plugging into when the kids are asleep, or when you have finally put yourself into a place of rest, to the other side. So I'm always like, what's happening the night before that's keeping you from getting that sleep?
Mm-hmm.
And you and I have talked a little bit about this. There are people that are night owls. Absolutely, about 30% of our population are night owls. And
including me, yes.
Yes, and that's really hard. And that is truly a struggle because you are trying to fit yourself into a box that is not really your natural self.
Right.
So it gets trickier for somebody like you who really naturally doesn't fit that morning person thing. So I started with the sleep because if you're not getting enough sleep, anything else that you're trying to make happen in your well-being is going to be extra challenging and maybe not sustainable.
I think, I don't know if it's an analogy, but an observation, as a mother of younger children,
Yeah.
you know when your kids don't sleep well,
Yes.
how they react to the world around them. Or think of babies, toddlers, they miss their nap, and it's like, we need to, all hands on deck, we have an emergency. And you don't think about the science of sleep for yourself, or you cost yourself the expense of that necessary kind of nurturing in so many instances. So even though I'm a night owl, I do work hard, and I kind of have to hit the reset button. It's helpful to have, the Apple Watch tell me, this is how much you slept.
Right.
Oh gosh, I have to be, it's only costing me, and the people around me, I guess I should say. And you can build in some of those productivity tricks to, acknowledge, okay, I'm going to be more productive in the evening, so it might not be a 5 a.m. wake-up call. I'm not going to bed at 9:30 or 10, but still I've set better boundaries around sleep for myself as we work together.
Yeah, you hit something really powerful, which is it's mindfulness, it's every day, it's who do I want to be the next morning, what's my A game, what's my race for the morning, what is that one thing that I want to have the energy for.
Right.
So it might be that you want to have the energy for when you get home for your kids.
Mm-hmm.
What's going to give me that energy? Sleep. And I get it. Sometimes something goes a little bit out of balance. Balance in and of itself is kind of a wiggly word because I don't really believe in any given time we are all 100% in balance. Something's going to give. But it's not that thing that gives can't be all the time, because that imbalance then is very profound.
Yeah, then I'm sure it can compound into with negative consequences.
Yes.
I'm not the kind of person who, it would be very difficult for me to be so rigid that, 10:30 was the bedtime every night. In financial planning, when you can create a financial plan where there's flexibility built in, then I think that's a solid plan, where it's not austerity, it's flexibility. And, maybe there's something there with that concept where you need to make accommodations for yourself if it's not going to work. If you have a big evening, how are you going to prepare for what's your schedule the next day? How much control do you have over your calendar? Everybody has a differing degree of that, but certainly the world's becoming more flexible, so that's certainly a consideration.
Absolutely. Flexibility, I'm going to hit on self-compassion.
Yes. I always tell people, please be kind to yourself, because so many times if something's going wrong, you're immediately thinking, what are the actions I need to do? How am I going to get this done? And it's like, well, what are you just doing to tell yourself? It's a really big deal, and you need some extra TLC. And you can't wait for somebody else to give it to you.
If you can pause for a moment and allow yourself, even giving yourself a virtual hug, and just saying, this is hard right now. And when you do that, you're on a cellular level, your body relaxes. The stress hormone sort of releases a little less, maybe, or even isn't even present for a moment. Serotonin, a more positive hormone, starts to kind of seep into the cells. Your physical self releases, softens, and in that moment, you end up having more sense of clarity, more sense of control, if someone were watching you, maybe they wouldn't see anything changing.
Mhm.
But on the inside, you have softened into the experience, and it will absolutely change the impact of that experience for you.
Again, I go back to resilience. If you
Mhm.
aren't practicing that self-care,
Mhm.
you may or may not, I think it lowers your probability of success.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
okay, so sleep is critical, that's science.
Mhm. Yeah.
And it's something that everyone does. So
Uh-huh.
this is relevant for, all people.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what's another component of fierce ownership?
Yeah, I'm going to be talking a little bit about time, and that's an interesting one, right? Because we all have the same amount of time,
Mhm.
right?
We both have enjoyed reading Laura Vanderkam,
Yes.
who she talks about the number of hours in the week. And it's like everybody has the same slate. So if you're like, I just can't do this, well, I mean, welcome to the world. It's been the same calendar forever.
Yes, yes, and I'm going to say the word easy. I don't mean to belittle it, but it is an easy thing for us to get caught up in saying. Just like this word, I'm busy. I'm busy.
Like
I'm busy.
is your life busy or is it full?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Scarcity
So,
versus abundance, right?
Right. So for me, around time management is sort of like energy management, really.
Mhm.
And again, identifying where you want to have that energy be, and then peeling back from there, and just looking at, okay, what can be slightly changed right now to, I still have the same amount of time, but what can be a little bit different in this day, so that I have what I really want, which is energy and joy at the end of it. It's not easy. Sometimes there's some simple tools we can do. That idea of, if I have a to-do list and I have to write a newsletter, I'm going to say I have 1 hour, and if I don't get it done in that hour, then I'm moving on.
Mhm.
So there's
calendar
a place
blocking
for
could be.
fierce ownership. Yeah. And it comes back to what happens, Melissa, is when you start to own that piece of your wellness, own your time schedule, or own your sleep, the bigger picture starts to happen, where then there's this trickle down effect that starts to happen in the other areas of your well-being.
Mhm.
And that's really what we're talking about, right? So it's not necessarily just sleep, it's not necessarily time, and we go underneath it, and it's your worth, which is the one that we come into.
Yeah.
Right? Who are you valuing at this very moment, so that you can be that person that you want to be, to show up in the world and do the magic that you were meant to be and do in this world.
If we could talk for a moment on time, I've observed that the more control you have over situations and circumstances, the more satisfaction is possible.
Mm-hmm.
I think of that in a career tracks where, people get a new job and they're like, especially when you're younger in your career and it's like day one and you haven't climbed to your potential where you're going to be in 20 or 10 years, and there's a dissatisfaction. But what I experienced in my career path was the more, kind of responsibility I got, which resulted in more control and opportunity, the more satisfaction I found. And with time, too, if you can find ways to either exhibit more control, reclaim time, and acknowledge that you have ownership. We're both entrepreneurs, so I know not everyone listening is going to feel that they have ownership of their work time. But you may find underneath the hood that both, whether it's work, it's time for yourself, or time for others, that you need to rearrange your philosophy and how you approach that, and who owns that, so that you're giving, the authority for someone to have some control of your time, but you have the ability to take it back.
Yes, yeah, love it. And just like you would do with your clients, what I would do is, if I were sitting in front of a client and the first thing they said to me is, this sounds great, Lisa, I just don't have the time. We would look at that together and say, okay, what are your gravity things? What are the things that you really can't change? You can't change that you've got a 3-year-old and the 3-year-old has a bedtime, because that's really important for you, and you're building this little person's life, and that's an important piece. So stick that in there. That's absolutely not going to change.
Right.
And so when we start to do that, it's very fascinating where people will start to notice, oh, yeah, so here's where I've allowed myself to sort of lose my boundaries, or here's where I keep saying yes to something that maybe I could maybe say no to. And that power, that fierce ownership of saying no to something so that you can say yes to others. And that happens when we hone in on one piece of our well-being, which is maybe what's happening in your calendar today.
Yeah, time tracking can be a really big deal. If you took a calendar out and really not just tracked your appointments, but, you know, how many hours did you spend watching TV with a glass of wine? Because you can't move anymore for that day. And with an adjustment, what would the results be in terms of, you know, whether you found more time for sleep, you found more time for relationships, you found more time for something you're passionate about, and you say you just don't have time. So finding that empty, just like empty calories, the empty moments, that you may be kind of self-soothing with, but could be addressed or could be the source of some new control.
Yes,
can be a big deal.
And it comes down to intention. It comes down to, I am not against television, I'm not against looking at Facebook, I'm not against whatever any of those things are that we do to help us kind of like unwind at the end of the day. What's important is that you're doing it from a place of mindfulness, and that you're acknowledging, I'm going to do this for an hour because this feels really good for me to just be sitting on the sofa, watching This Is Us, have the Kleenex next to you.
Yeah.
You know, if you do that
this
from a
is
place
you
of
taking care of yourself.
Yes.
But there's a limitation.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's okay. So where else in your world can you make some adjustments so that that feels good to you, that's a get to, that you're doing this for self-love instead of from a place of stress or self-deprivation.
Or mindlessness.
Yeah.
You know, just I need to check out.
Yeah.
If you need to check out, maybe you need to go to bed, you know, or meditate.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so time that's a big deal, and that is something that everyone has, just like you said, which I think is very powerful to acknowledge. Now, how does sleep and time factor into this equation of worth, which is certainly something, you know, my face is lighting up because you described relevancy, certainly a value. There's something that's a value that relates to worth. So tell me about, what is the story about worth?
Yeah, it comes from the clients that I see on a daily basis that will look at their well-being from every other perspective, but when we dig a little deeper, there's a lack of self-acceptance that they deserve this extra time or this extra sleep or this idea that it's okay for them to sit on the sofa and not do anything. And so part of it is, you know, a reason why I'm doing my series, this particular series, in this order is because sometimes we need to pull back a little bit. That's a giant elephant that can be very hard for women especially to look at. Like, I am worth it.
Right. No, that is not, there. You can't just say, you're worth it.
Right.
Check that off the list. Make a sign in your mirror. No, that's not, you know, that is a concept that's a journey. It may be that you feel worthy in one aspect of your life. Maybe you feel like you're really hitting it out of the park as a mother, but you're not as a spouse. Or work is something that you feel like I'm doing a good job, but then home is, you know, I'm a mess. So, you know, it can be nuanced as well. This isn't just poor self-esteem. It's, you know, how do you feel about your performance? And
exactly. And what happens is when we have that discipline to self-care, which, by the way, right? Self-care is not getting pedicures and getting manicures, although those are really awesome.
It may be for me.
But it's the discipline, right?
Right.
It is the discipline that allows you to turn off your device and put it in the other room so that you can't hear it, and it's not the blue light isn't impacting your sleep. It's the discipline that you show when you allow yourself that 5 minutes extra to yourself, sitting on the sofa and not paying attention to anybody else but yourself. That's deep self-care, and that comes from a place of, I am worth it right now. If we can't own our own worth, especially for women of girls, and you know my passion around women and girls in terms of if we can model that we are worth it and we are valued and I value myself enough to take care of myself, if we can model that for our daughters, it's incredibly powerful. And the work that I did with Girls on the Run was completely based on this idea. We're not just about like having these girls be confident, that's one thing, but having them be confident because they know that they are valuable as a human being is just a mind-boggling, transformational thing that we see in the girls and I see in my clients. And so then they stop questioning some of the decisions that they're making. Those decisions around their self-care become who they are. They're seamlessly put in, but it's not easy. It's not easy. It's simple in a way, but it's not easy. And it's that effort that we have to put into it.
Yeah,
unfortunately,
it's a process,
for a lot of
right?
us. Yeah.
And the more successful you are, in some cases, you know, again, there's no, you can't externally look at the person. It's looking at research on imposter syndrome that Amy Cuddy's book Presence talks about, how high achieving, you know, Ivy League grads feel like, you know, somebody's going to find me out. I'm totally not worth this. And in fact, women are more comfortable talking about it, but some studies have shown that women and men both experience the same level of imposter syndrome. It's just not as culturally acceptable for the men to share their vulnerability.
Yes, definitely. So, I was completely guilty of that, and still am sometimes, but, you know, that sense like I just want somebody to stop me on the street and say, Lisa, you have no idea what you're doing, and I'd be like, oh,
yes.
Thank you for saying that. You're right. I feel that sense of release, but yeah, definitely.
So
it
true.
All plays into it.
So I think the concept of fierce ownership with its relationship of sleep, time, and worth is huge. So I know I'll be using that in conversations, and I'm glad that we're recording this conversation so that we can explore it more fully. As we wrap up, are there a couple, you know, practices that are actionable that you'd suggest for people that really want to start down that journey of fierce ownership?
Yeah, I always recommend that you start from a place of, how do I say this? Look at your life, look at it from a perspective of a wellness wheel, or where there's lots of different areas. We have spiritual health, we have financial health, we have social health, well-being, like how we connect with our
relationships,
physical health. It's just one piece of that wheel. I would start by looking at that and choosing one. Just choose one area. Don't allow yourself to get overwhelmed and be like, yeah, but this feels really important. Choose one, and then choose a baby step. And literally, that baby step could be, let's say it's sleep. So a baby step might be deciding that you're going to get up to your bedroom at 9:30 instead of 9:40. I mean, it can be that small. It can even be, this month, I'm just going to look and start to notice where I am a little bit out of balance, because everything feels out of balance, but maybe there's one thing that I can just hone in on. So that's one thing. And the other is looking at everything that you have. I know that gratitude feels like a really, for some people, I think a gratitude journal conjures up like, what's that going to do for me? We know from the science, from the neuroscience, that when we look at our life from a place of gratitude at the end of our day, and we just like look like what went well today, and we finish our day from a place of positivity and gratitude and compassion, that we already are changing the hormones in our physical self around stress and well-being. So it could be as simple as just 3 words on a piece of paper. What went well today? Do. You know, you write them down. You don't have to look at them again. You don't even have to say, I'm going to do this. Right? It's just a little bit of a thought dump. This went well today. Boom, throw it out.
It's a huge concept. You're really priming your mind. You're working to change the mindset. When I do presentations, speak to a room, I took this from Zing Train, local here.
Yeah.
But a priming exercise, whether you're talking about things you're proud about yourself, or for the one I'm doing at the end of this month, things you're thankful for that have occurred in the day, because my speech is at the end of the day. But it can change the energy of a room. It changes the way that you take in information. So there is, and it happens to be, we have 3 company values, and one of them is gratitude and abundance. Mm-hmm. That was intentional, because that's how we want to approach working with financial planning. That's how I want to be as a business owner. That's how I want my coworkers to think as they approach challenges. Gratitude's a huge deal, and there's a ton of science. So we've talked a lot of science today.
Yeah,
Sleep,
we did.
Gratitude, neuroscience.
Yeah,
big deal.
The connectivity of the physical self and the mind, and they're so connected. And you can be somebody that exercises a bazillion hours a week, and yet your mind is kind of a hot mess. And the other way around, when you put them together, it's just so powerful.
That is exactly why I wanted to have this conversation, Lisa. Thank you so much. I want to make sure that if anyone's listening to this and they want to reach out to you, that they know how to find you. So again, here's your contact information, lisahesse.com. You have a newsletter, so I am assuming on your website you can sign up for the newsletter. Is that right?
Yes, you can.
And you can also reach out at your email, lisa@lisahesse.com. Is that right?
Yes.
You're doing some webinars and series on fierce ownership, and you also have consulting. So, but there's good information on your blog and your newsletter. So I always enjoy receiving it. And then, of course, again, I'm Melissa Joy, and here's contact information for us at Pearl Planning, which is located in Dexter. You work both with people on location in and around Ann Arbor in Southeast Michigan, but also over the miles. Is that correct?
I do. I work with anybody around the world, really. The technology of Zoom is really amazing.
Yeah. Same goes for me. You know, some clients I may work with for several years before I end up meeting them, just because of technology. And when you're the right fit, you're the right fit. So.
Super good reminder that technology is not always against us.
The enemy. So true. Well, Lisa, we have wanted to have this conversation for so long. I'm glad that now it's out into the world. Thank you. And I know this won't be the last time we collaborate. So until next time, thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. I've enjoyed it immensely.
Great.
All right.